Holy City Center Radio. It is episode 79, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, February 1st, 2023. Happy February. Can you believe it? 1 month of 2023 is already in the books. It feels like it's flying by. I hope you had a good January. I enjoyed the first month of the year. I was able to do some fun things. Started doing this podcast multiple times a week, and it's been pretty good. So I can't complain too much. I hope you all can say at least the same as well. But I can't delay. We have to get into it. Lots to talk about here on this Wednesday. Some updates and some news stuff as usual. But let's start off what we talked about in the last episode. There's been some updates to the Tyre Nichols case, whatever the appropriate word is for that travesty that took place in Memphis. So the fallout from that deadly police beating has continued. 3 Memphis Fire Department personnel have been fired. There's also been an announcement that 2 more police officers were placed on leave. That brings the total up to 7 police officers that have been fired from the Memphis Police Department. In addition, 2 emergency medical technicians have been terminated, and this is all regarding their response to that January 7th encounter. The investigation concluded that the 2 EMTs, quote, failed to conduct an adequate patient assessment of Mr. Nichols, end quote. So based on what the emergency departments looked into, they said that they should have been responding much quicker, which was obvious to anyone who's seen the video or read the stories. They heard early on that there was a suspect that had been pepper sprayed. So that alone should have been cause to check on, Tyre Nichols. But then after, of course, seeing him be beat and seeing him bloodied, what was the delay for that? It made no sense. So that's the latest update that we have there. There'll be more, I'm sure, as the fallout continues. We may see more people fired, more charges could end up coming out. So we'll keep you posted on that. More updates. This was coming. The Murdaugh case continued on Monday and on Tuesday, and obviously we'll also pick back up today. As I mentioned in previous episodes, I'll do my best to update you all on the big news from this court case. Sometimes I record before court is out for the day, so there may be some big revelations that I don't cover, and that is why I'll be sure to cover them in the next episode if that happens. The main focus from the last 2 days of the trial, though, is all centered around a quote that not everybody can agree on. Is that quote, "I did him so bad," or "they did him so bad"? That was a big debate on Monday when they played video of Alex Murdaugh talking to the police officers. Well, according to the South Carolina investigator who was in Alex Murdaugh's presence when he said that, he is pretty sure, or not pretty sure, he was adamant that Alex said, "I did him so bad," in reference to his son, Paul. So that was the investigator's belief, that it was kind of an admission of guilt by Alex. But to some others, those inside and outside the courtroom who heard the clip, disagreed and said it sounded like Murdaugh said they did him so bad. So some discrepancies on that audio from a police interview. It'll be interesting what the jury thinks of that. Obviously, we're not going to hear from Alex directly. He's not going to refute that. He's not going to take the stand. But the investigator, when asked, said he was confident that he said "I" and not "they," referencing the murder of his son, Paul. So there's been a lot of talk about that. Is this kind of like an accidental admission, while he was being interviewed? Did he say "they," referring to whomever the killers were, if it's not him? A lot of debate on that. But certainly, I thought the most interesting thing that came out of the case the last couple days. In addition to that, just some other quick updates. During some cross-examination, the defense tried to get a SLED agent who, had responded to the scene to admit that it's possible that there were 2 shooters. After some back and forth, the SLED agent did say that is possible, but would not did not say so adamantly. It was just like, yeah, I wasn't there that night. It could be possible. So defense trying to sow some doubt. Number one, that their client was involved, but also trying to say, throughout this investigation, things have been missed, or they honed in on Alec and they haven't explored other possibilities. He also talked about there was a bloody footprint that was in the feed room of the kennels where Paul was killed. And we found out through the trial that that bloody footprint belonged to a member of law enforcement. So accidentally had stepped in some blood, and that led to the footprint. So again, just trying to sow some doubt about, wow, this crime scene doesn't seem like it was too well protected if a law enforcement officer is stepping in blood. Um, you know, that's kind of been the focus these last few days for the defense. In addition to that, there has been some talk about the cell phones. I've talked about that in a couple previous episodes. State prosecutors say that Maggie and Paul's phones had locked for the final time at 8:49 p.m. Uh, that may come up later in reference to testimony involving Alex's cell phone and where it was pinging at around that time. So we'll see where that goes. There was also some talk about the shell casings that were found. A SLED agent testified about searching the grounds and finding spent 300 caliber blackout shell casings by the gun room's exterior door. They also found those casings on a shooting range across the street from the house. We've mentioned that before, but this was the official testimony that those shell casings are the same type of shell casings and may have come from the same gun. Is what the implication is, that there's a shooting range where this gun has been used, and it's the same gun that was used in the murders. Obviously, the point there is trying to tie it to Alec, if not someone else in the family. But obviously, this trial is for Alec. So there was some talk about that. Um, and the only other thing is, we already knew this in that recording of Alec talking to investigators. He had mentioned that he had gone to his Hampton law office on June 7th, 2021, but came home early that day because his son Paul was coming by. He did not mention in that testimony that his firm, or not testimony, I'm sorry, in the investigation when he was being interviewed, he did not mention that his firm's chief financial officer confronted him earlier that same day about missing legal fees. So he did not bring that up. And the prosecution is trying to, this is their case, is that these mounting financial issues, the walls were closing in on Alec on a lot of different things, and that is what led him to these murders. So they're trying to say, like, hey, he wasn't offering up any information about himself, to make him be a suspect. He was quick to talk about the boat accident that, involving Paul, but didn't bring up this, big thing that happened to him on that same day. So they're trying to look at that. So, like I said, last 2 days, I don't think anything groundbreaking. I think that quote is what everyone's kind of focused on. I'm interested to know what you all think he said. You can now hear that audio out there. Basically, a lot of the evidence isn't allowed to be broadcast live. There's television stations streaming the court case, or the trial rather, and the next day is when those things are released to the public. Obviously, some stuff is still held back. Like, you're not going to find any graphic crime scene photos or anything like that. So you can go look up this stuff. You're not going to see anything of that nature. So that little piece of audio is out there for you to listen to. And of course, we will keep you updated on the next podcast of any other developments. Bringing it back here to Charleston, some King Street bar patrons may be in for a not so great surprise here early this month. To beef up Upper King's newly permanent post 6 p.m. weekend parking ban, the city is sending in some tow trucks. So the city initially began banning parking on King Street after 6 p.m. on the weekend back in May of 2021. This is in reference to a string of violent incidents. Supposedly, the hope was that getting rid of these parked cars on that main street, that main section of King Street where the vast majority of people congregate on the weekend, would prevent people from, hanging around vehicles when the bars are letting out, or even worse, maybe storing drugs or guns inside their car for easy access. That's according to Charleston Police Captain Jason Bruder. From Thursday through Saturday after 6 p.m., cars parked in the 70 spaces on King between Spring and Calhoun will now be towed by Jennings Towing, instead of getting a ticket. This goes into effect on February 9th. So the city started the parking ban by just issuing tickets. And since it took effect back in May of, or after May of 2021, rather, after those incidents happened, they have issued about 3,760 parking tickets just on Upper King, just in that section. Those tickets are $45. And according to the police captain, uh, most of those tickets were not going to repeat offenders. So after getting a ticket, people learned their lesson, it seems, and didn't try it again. But because it just kept happening and happening with more and more people, the city has decided, okay, the tickets aren't doing what we wanted them to do. It's not having the desired effect. So we're going to have to move to something a little bit more drastic, and that is to start towing cars. Now, that decision had come after months of discussion, and the police captain said they really seemed like that was the only option. So be very careful if you are going out on King Street and parking there. You don't even have to be going to the bars. I mean, if you just happen to be shopping or hanging out or going to dinner, after 6 p.m., as I mentioned, Thursday through Saturday. That's the other key. It starts on Thursday. It's not just a Friday, Saturday thing. So Thursday through Saturday after 6 p.m., if you are on King Street between Spring and Calhoun, you could be towed. That again begins on February 9th. So we're not very far away from that. The towing company is Jennings Towing. So if it does happen to you, that's who you will be wanting to contact. All right, updating the state's battle to murder people, basically. I mean, that's what's happening. Death penalty discussion. We've talked about this a lot, and here's the latest update. The state Supreme Court said it will not rule on whether it's constitutional to execute inmates by firing squad or electrocution until a circuit judge determines if South Carolina's prison agency tried hard enough to secure drugs for lethal injection. This happened last Thursday. The order means that it could be 4 more months until justices decide whether a newly organized firing squad or the electric chair are legal methods of execution in this state. This current order reversed a previous ruling that denied the plaintiff's requests for such information from the circuit court. So basically, here's what Chief Justice Donald Beatty said: inmates' discovery requests regarding lethal injection are particularly relevant and reasonable in light of the fact that for over 10 years, other states have continued to perform executions using lethal injection rather than electrocution and the firing squad. He also said that the High Court found it impossible, quote, to evaluate the state's assessment that such drugs are not available in South Carolina, end quote. So basically, the justice said that state lawyers have failed to answer how or when South Carolina officials had sought the drugs that are used in lethal injection, and they're just trying to get some more information to see, has it really been that difficult? What are the efforts they've made? And they need that piece of information first before even moving on to deciding if them adding the firing squad so that inmates would have a selection, because that's the state law. They have to have a choice of how they're going to be executed. State, if you remember, claims they ran out of the lethal injection drugs and could not get any more, so there was no more option. The inmates, anybody on death row, didn't have a choice anymore. So without that choice, the state couldn't execute them. So they decided to add the firing squad. And then that, of course, has been challenged, saying that that's not okay. Cruel and unusual punishment, things of that nature. So South Carolina, which was previously one of the most prolific states, at least in terms of size, when it came to capital punishment, has not killed anyone on death row since May of 2011. Its batch of lethal injection drugs supposedly expired back in 2013. So the agency says their inability to replace them is what caused the legislature 2 years ago to pass that law that reverted to electrocution as a default method if a inmate refuses to choose, and they added the option of death by firing squad. The law does say that if lethal injection, if they are able to get those drugs again, that'll still be an option. They just haven't been able to. So for now, uh, executions in the state are still on hold. There are many efforts, as I mentioned, by the state to try to make it so they can, legally kill people again. And we talked about one method where the state is trying to think of laws where they can shield the drug companies who provide the drugs so that no one knows who provided them. So they're trying to go that route. And now the court, is trying to rule. These have been brought to the courts by proponents of this measure. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep you updated on that. And that's not the only thing the state is trying to reverse and get back on what they think is the right track. Because in our next story, South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson filed a petition on Monday asking the Supreme Court to rehear its ruling on the so-called Fetal Heartbeat Bill. Wilson said in his statement that the state, quote, respectfully disagrees, end quote, with the South Carolina Supreme Court's recent decision, which was that the abortion ban, aka the Fetal Heartbeat Bill, was unconstitutional on the grounds of the privacy provision in our Constitution. So we'll see what happens. As I mentioned, the highest court blocked that 6-week abortion ban from taking effect earlier this month. Governor Henry McMaster has previously said that they're going to work to challenge this and find ways around it so they can start banning abortion again in the state. We'll again keep you updated on any developments. College of Charleston basketball, unfortunately, has fallen out of the Associated Press top 25. On Monday, it was announced they are no longer in that grouping after they suffered a weekend loss to Hofstra, which I mentioned in the last podcast. The Cougars are still having an incredible season. They're 21-2 now. It's their first loss since the beginning of the year, and they're also 9-1 in their conference. So still playing really well. Could very easily end back up in the top 25. They'll aim to get back there and start another winning streak when they go travel to Drexel on Thursday. They also have a game on Saturday. All right. Now, this story on Tuesday was very much making the rounds on social media and things because it's funny, but also not at the same time, because of what could have happened or who could have seen this. But if you have kids listening to this podcast, which you absolutely should not be, but if you do, this is definitely not one for the kiddos. So an employee at a gas station in Mount Pleasant is facing charges after he was found masturbating on a bucket outside of the business. This is according to an incident report that was obtained by local TV station ABC News 4. So all these details are coming from that police report, which ABC News 4 then reported on. On Monday afternoon of this Monday, that is, officers responded to the 7-Eleven located at 3930 North Highway 17 for reports of a man exposing himself. So what happened was a witness said he stopped by the gas station after he picked up his child from school, and shortly after arriving, the child told his father, "Hey, Dad, there's some guy masturbating behind the building." So the witness said he then drove to the back of the building, saw the employee, who was later identified as a 20-year-old worker there, um, seated on a bucket with his pants down. Witness, unsurprisingly, went inside and spoke to the manager. The manager and the witness then confronted the man outside, who said the police report stated that he quickly stood up, pulled up his pants, and began to apologize frantically. Officers then arrived on the scene. They interviewed the suspect, who they reported was visibly nervous. And here's where it gets a little silly. So the suspect initially stated, "Oh, hey, I just had to use the restroom. There was too many customers going in and out of the gas station's bathroom, so I just decided to pee outside." He said while he was peeing, he began to smoke marijuana and that some ash fell and landed on the tip of his area, we'll say. Um, there was some self-censorship on this post because I'm saying a lot of things that I don't necessarily want out there. But anyway, so that's all according to the report. So his excuse was peeing, decided to smoke while peeing. Why he had to say he was smoking marijuana? Like, why are you admitting, even if that part's not true, the smoking part? Why are you telling them it's marijuana? That'd be probable cause to search you, man. But anyway, he claims he decided to smoke some weed while peeing, as one does apparently, and that some ash landed in a not so great place. Obviously, he was concerned. So the suspect said he was just checking himself for injuries, and that's why it looked like he was playing with himself. When police told him they didn't believe that story, shocking, I know, the suspect began to cry and admitted that, yes, he indeed was masturbating outside the business. He apologized and said he didn't know why he did it. Unfortunately for him, he was still arrested and transported to the Alcanna Detention Center, where he was booked shortly before 7 p.m. on Monday on one count of indecent exposure. So, yeah, as I said, you probably heard that story, but if not, yikes. The quick thinking on his feet to try to explain away what he was actually doing is it's impressive. That was a good attempt, A for effort, I suppose. And on that note, we should probably end this episode and move on. So I hope you enjoyed the episode, even that last kind of gross part. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll keep you up to date on all those other stories, a lot of things that we will be hearing over and over again this year, it seems. And not just that Murdaugh trial, but all these court cases and challenges and all that other stuff. So I appreciate you all sticking with me to help me out as well as yourself so you don't miss any more episodes of this podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and review. All of that helps me, as I mentioned, but also ensures that you don't miss any more podcasts. I also want to thank some recent Patreon subscribers I had. I've had 2 recently. I don't know if they came from the podcast or saw the link somewhere else, but I appreciate you all. If you're interested in learning more about that, go to patreon.com/Holy City Center. You can also help out by going to holycitycenter.com/shop. You can pick up some merchandise. And of course, just going to the website, sharing posts, liking things, letting your friends on social media know about the latest news, that all helps as well. And I really appreciate it. I also want to say thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins of LMC Sound System, who produces each and every episode of this podcast, and Tyler Boone, who allows us to use his music in each one of these episodes as well. Look forward to speaking to you all again on Friday. We're already midway through the week. I hope it's been a good one, and I hope when I speak to you on Friday, you're doing even better than you are today. So until that time, good night and good luck.